For 15 years, he vanished. No music, no performances, just silence. But why? Was he blacklisted? Was he done with reggae? Or was this the boldest protest the music industry has ever seen? Meet Winston Rodney, better known as Burning Spear, the man who refused to sell out, the warrior who defied the industry, and the last godfather of roots reggae. This is the untold story of a legend who walked away from fame to protect the soul of reggae, and then returned with a vengeance. His voice is not just a melody, but a battle cry, a call to consciousness that has transcended generations. His journey was never one of glamour or excess, nor did he chase the fleeting glories of commercial stardom. His was a mission, an unrelenting pursuit of truth, of spiritual awakening, of the preservation of the sound and message that defined roots reggae. Unlike his contemporaries who sought to balance reggae's radical spirit with commercial appeal, Burning Spear remained an uncompromising warrior of the genre. And so, he was crowned the last godfather of roots reggae. Winston Rodney was born on March 1st, 1945, in a world that was still reeling from the weight of colonial rule. His hometown, St. Ann's Bay, Jamaica, was a quiet place, rich with history, yet distant from the towering influence of Kingston's bustling reggae scene. But it was here, in this seemingly unremarkable setting, that the seeds of a revolutionary artist were planted. From a young age, the sounds that filled his ears were not those of reggae, because reggae, as a genre, had not yet been born. Instead, the distant radio signals that floated across the sea from the United States introduced him to the smooth croons of Sam Cooke, the piercing cries of Otis Redding, the electrifying energy of James Brown. The rhythms of soul, jazz, and R&B seeped into his subconscious, shaping his appreciation for melody, rhythm, and the unspoken power of music to move the human soul. Yet, it was not American music that would define his destiny. It was something far closer to home. It was a movement, an ideology, a spiritual awakening. It was Rastafarianism. The teachings of Marcus Garvey, Jamaica's greatest Pan-African leader, spoke of liberation, of black pride, of the destiny of African descendants to reclaim their heritage. These words struck a chord within the young Winston. To many, Garvey was just a historical figure. To Winston Rodney, he was a prophet. He was the burning spear that would ignite the flames of change, not just in his heart, but in the music that would define his life. It was in 1969 that fate intervened in Winston Rodney's life. One conversation would change everything. It was Bob Marley, already an icon in the making, who pointed him towards Studio One, Jamaica's most legendary recording studio, the birthplace of ska, rocksteady, and reggae. With hesitant steps, but an unshakable resolve, Winston Rodney walked into the halls of Clement, Sir Coxsone, Dodd's kingdom. He was not alone. Alongside him was Rupert Willington, a fellow dreamer, a brother in rhythm. Together, they formed a duo, and later, with the addition of Delroy Hines, a trio. This was the genesis of Burning Spear, a name that would soon become synonymous with roots reggae. Their first single, Door Peep, was released in 1969, a haunting, hypnotic chant that carried the weight of generations of struggle. It was not just a song, it was an announcement, a declaration that Burning Spear had arrived. The debut albums followed, Studio One presents Burning Spear, 1973, and Rocking Time, 1974. These records were raw, spiritual, unfiltered in their reverence for Rastafarianism and African heritage. But as with many early reggae artists under the shadow of Studio One, there was a price to pay. There were whispers of exploitation, of unfair contracts, of artists receiving pennies while the producers reaped fortunes. And Burning Spear, despite the power of his music, was no exception. The breaking point came in the mid-1970s. Like so many before him, Burning Spear realized that Studio One was a cage, a gilded prison where his music was owned by someone else, his voice controlled by forces that cared little for his message. The promise of success had come at the cost of his freedom, and so he walked away. For a time, he considered abandoning music altogether. But fate had other plans. It was Jack Ruby, the visionary producer, who pulled him back from the brink, who saw the fire still burning within him. Ruby believed in the power of Burning Spear's music, in its ability to reignite a people's consciousness. The result was Marcus Garvey, 1975, an album that did more than just solidify Burning Spear's place in reggae history. It revolutionized it. It was a musical manifesto, an urgent call to the sons and daughters of Africa to reclaim their identity. The title track, Marcus Garvey, became an anthem. The album's success propelled him beyond Jamaica's shores, earning him international recognition. Island Records took notice. The label that had turned Bob Marley into a global superstar now wanted a piece of Burning Spear. The world was opening up, but at what cost? He knew what had happened to others. He had seen reggae artists swallowed whole by the industry, their voices diluted for the sake of commercial appeal. Would he allow that to happen to him? By the late 1970s, Burning Spear had become more than just a reggae artist. He was a prophet of sound, a revolutionary armed with a microphone and a militant rhythm section. The Marcus Garvey album had shattered boundaries, carrying the pulse of Jamaican resistance to audiences who had never before heard such a raw, unfiltered call to action. His music was not just entertainment. It was a lesson in history, a cry for liberation, a reminder that reggae was not simply a genre, but a spiritual and political force. The deep, hypnotic chants of Burning Spear were not meant for the dance halls. They were meant for the streets, the gatherings, the consciousness of a people rising from centuries of oppression. And yet, as his fame grew, so did the pressures of the music industry. Burning Spear had witnessed firsthand what had happened to his contemporaries. Island Records, which had signed him following the success of Marcus Garvey, was the same label that had taken Bob Marley's roots-driven sound and molded it for international appeal. Would Burning Spear suffer the same fate? Would his music, so deeply rooted in Rastafarianism and resistance, be diluted for the sake of sales? The industry demanded compromises. It demanded commercial hits, accessible melodies, and radio-friendly hooks. But Burning Spear was not a man who bowed to demands. He refused to let his music become a product shaped by executives who had no understanding of its purpose. So, he did what few artists dare to do. He walked away from the machine. By the early 1980s, Burning Spear had cut ties with the major labels, refusing to be another cog in the corporate reggae wheel. He established Spear Records, an independent label that allowed him complete creative control. In an era where record companies dictated an artist's every move, this was an act of rebellion. It was a declaration that no force, no label, no producer, no executive would own Burning Spear's voice. But independence came at a price. Without the backing of a major label, distribution was a battle. Airplay was a struggle. Yet, despite these challenges, Burning Spear's fan base grew stronger. The people who followed his music were not casual listeners. They were believers. They were disciples of roots reggae, drawn to his uncompromising commitment to the sound and message of Rastafari. In the midst of his rise, Burning Spear's presence was not confined to music alone. His aura, his energy, his radical presence demanded to be captured on screen. In 1978, he was cast in Rockers, the legendary reggae film that depicted the struggles of Jamaican musicians fighting against exploitation and survival in the ghetto. Unlike scripted Hollywood stories, Rockers was reality, wrapped in the rhythms of the island, unfolding through the voices of those who had lived the struggle. It was a testament to the authenticity of roots reggae. And Burning Spear? He was not an actor playing a role, he was the role. He was the essence of what Rockers stood for. The film's impact was immediate. It cemented reggae's rebellious image, showing the world that this music was not just for dancing. It was a movement. For decades, Burning Spear had been a lone warrior in the world of reggae. The industry, dominated by mainstream trends, had often overlooked the purest form of the genre, roots reggae. But the music world could not ignore him forever. After years of being nominated but never awarded, Burning Spear finally won his first Grammy in 2000 for Calling Rastafari. It was a victory not just for him, but but for every reggae purist who had fought against the industry's commercial pull. It was proof that even in the new millennium, there was still a place for raw, radical reggae. And he did it again. In 2008, he secured a second Grammy for Jah Is Real. For some, 2 Grammy wins would mark a moment of celebration, a chance to relax, to reflect. But Burning Spear was not finished fighting. Instead of basking in the glow of awards, he disappeared from music for 15 years. For 15 years, Burning Spear vanished from the industry. No new music, no major performances, only silence. But this silence was not inactivity. It was a protest, a battle that could not be fought with sound. It had to be fought with absence. During this time, he focused on exposing the exploitation of reggae artists, fighting for ownership rights, and ensuring that the new generation of musicians would not fall into the same traps that had plagued his own career. While the world wondered if he would ever return, he remained unbothered. Reggae was not just about songs, it was a mission. Then, in 2023, the flames were reignited. Burning Spear returned with the album No Destroyer, a title that carried the weight of his defiance. It was a statement to the industry that had tried, time and time again, to erase the essence of roots reggae. The album was immediately nominated for a Grammy, proving that even after decades away, his voice still commanded the respect of the world. And, as if time had not touched him, he picked up right where he left off, touring, performing, and standing as a pillar of authenticity in an era where reggae had become increasingly commercialized. Today, at 79 years old, Burning Spear remains an unmovable force in reggae music. Unlike many who have come and gone, who have drifted into the embrace of commercial fame or faded into obscurity, he has never compromised. He has fought against the music industry, against the dilution of reggae's message, against the forces that try to take his sound, his identity, his power. And through it all, he has stood beside Bob Marley, not in a shadow, but as a force of equal strength, a warrior of reggae, a champion of Rastafarianism, a guardian of the truth that reggae was meant to tell. He is not just an artist. He is the last godfather of roots reggae. But here's the question. What if he had taken the commercial route? Would he have been a bigger, global icon? Or would reggae have lost one of its last true warriors? Let's talk in the comments. And if you love powerful stories of resistance, don't forget to like, subscribe, and keep the fire blazing.